Welcome to the next podcast with Millinery.Info. I'm your host, Lauren Ritchie. It's so wonderful to welcome you to this episode of the series. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Millinery.Info. It's a series where we welcome leading milliners from around the globe into your ears and studio. I'm very excited to share this episode with Irene van Vugt with you today. I have long admired her meticulous detail across her work in both bags and hats. Before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to take a moment to say thank you to our wonderful podcast sponsors: Hablocks Australia, Louise McDonald Milliner, House of Adorn, The Hat Magazine, Hatters Millinery Supplies, Lifted Millinery, Be Unique Millinery, Judith M. Millinery Supply House, Hats by Lico, Hat Academy, and Millinery Australia. You can find a link to each of these businesses in our show notes. That's where you get your podcast, so in the app or on our website. Thank you so much for listening to this episode today. I invite you to take a moment to head across to our Patreon page. This is where you could sign up to become a sponsor of the podcast or another Patreon level showing your support for Millinery.Info. It's linked through our website, but also through your podcast app as well. It's a little way to let us know that you've been enjoying this content. While you're on this page, you could also find the new downloadable files that are available. There's a style sheet, photo shoot running schedule, and client order form. These are templates that you can download and use in your business. If you have an idea of another document you'd love, please let me know, and I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. It is so wonderful to have you here, Irene. You're joining me from the Netherlands, and I'm currently in Melbourne, but it's wonderful to be able to connect with you online and chat hats. Could you take me back to how did you first become involved with millinery?
Well, I was in the first year of my study at the Academy of Arts, and at a party I met someone, and she was on a hat making course in Rotterdam, and I never heard of that because the courses were very rare at the time. And so I called the lady and asked if I could join her as well. And so I went there, and she was very inspiring. And around 1992, we were at the kitchen table of her home. Her name is Mika Abel. And we were taught the basics of millinery. And soon after that, I was sold. And some years later, I graduated with 4 collections of hats at the Academy of Arts. So that was my beginning.
So you ended up at the Academy of Arts. Had you been creative or taken art classes through the rest of your schooling that got you to that point?
Yeah, I also did bag making and shoe making. Yeah, but I quit shoe making after 1 year because it's so much to do and you had so many things, materials and machines, everything. So I thought it's too much, and I did a little bag making.
Did you always know that you wanted to go into a creative field when you were studying?
Yes, yeah, definitely.
And tell me about growing up was it a creative household? Were you making when you were much younger?
No, my father was handy, and my mother, she knitted, and she sew, and yeah, she made some clothes too. So it was not very artistic, but more techniques or craftsmanship.
And when did you first take to the sewing machine?
Yeah, I think I was 10 years old or something, and my mother had a small room, and there was the sewing machine, and I thought I want to learn to stitch, and then I teared a page with lines, and so I began to stitch the lines, and every day it went better and better. And now I advise my students to do the same because it's a rather good idea.
It explains your meticulous stitching on all of your work that it traces back so far.
Maybe, yeah, yeah. Well, my little boy, when he has this birthday party, he wanted to have a party for Robin Hood. So I made
Very
8
cute.
green capes. Yeah, very cute. And then he helped me stitching by pressing. He sat down on the floor and with his hand he pressed the pedal. So we had a lot of fun with the sewing machine.
Oh, how fantastic that he had that around to know what to do and that he wanted to take part in the creation of these little costumes.
Yeah, I told him further, further, press harder, 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 slower, slower, slower.
They would have been the best Robin Hood costumes.
Yeah, yeah.
When you're at college and you'd started taking millinery classes, did you have an idea that millinery and bag making could be a career? Or what did you think you might go on to do?
Yeah, well, I was attracted. I thought it's a good idea, but at that time I didn't know what was lying ahead of me. No, not at all. I thought it was just a technique to learn, but it really got me. So I went further with it.
And did you have an idea you'd be working for someone else or in your own business?
No, in my own business, because in the Netherlands you can't really work for somebody. No, no one has a really that big shop or big business to have employees.
So after you graduated from college, what came next for you?
Um, yeah, I had a job, but only for a few days. And then in the Netherlands, we have a program, or at least in those days, from the government. You get some money for 2 years.
So you got funds to
Yeah,
was it to start a business?
yes, yeah, to build up your practice. And so you had to apply for that and show photos and um, fill forms and write some words why you want to have it, and then you're for come in the commission, and then the commission decides whether you are going to get the grant or not. So I was very lucky. I got that, so I could quit my job and have more time for designing, making hats. So that was really great. Yeah, we call it a stipendium.
Where were you working from at that time? Did you have a
From
studio space or?
no, just home. Yeah, and that was no problem at all. And in a few years, I got the large studio at Oude.
Where does Teeny fit in the story? When did you meet her?
After I think 2 or 3 years after graduation, I met her. She called me because there was a happening in Utrecht, the place where we both live. And she asked me for an exhibition or something. And then we came to talk, and I would like to give workshops or lessons or something. And then she said, well, do it here because I'm retiring a little, and so you can rent the place, everything with the blocks and the machines, and so we made that agreement, and yeah, I did it for 8 years or something, 10 years, and then I got my own atelier, my own workshop room.
When did the combination of hats and bags start to come together?
When I was at the Academy of Arts, I did some practical years at a month at a studio where they designed and made leather bags. And so half a year I worked there. So there I started it. And after a few years, I thought, wouldn't it be nice to make matching bags with the hats? But I thought, yeah, well, when do I have to do that? And one day I thought, well, it's enough. I'm going to start. And I asked a colleague if she could help me out starting making those little frame bags.
The materials you work with at the moment, what do you primarily work in?
Felt and leather. I like
And has it
those.
always been your favorite materials?
Yeah, I guess so. Felt was my first love, and the last years also leather because it matches good with the bags. Huh?
When you're designing and working on a new concept, where do you seek your inspiration from?
Well, from costume history or architecture, nature. Most I'm fascinated by the feminine looks and elegance of bygone times, and inspired by the 1940s and 50s. I like the classical and elegant forms, but they must have also a contemporary look. And of course, I love those little hats with matching purses.
And when you're developing a technique, what's your process for that?
I start with a vague idea, and then I'm going to make prototypes, or I just try out what I can do with the material, with the ideas, and then it's growing and growing. And I also like to work with the material because the material has also a task. And so it's a combination of the material and what I do. And together we come to something. So I think it's for me it's hard to make designs on a computer or something because then you don't know what the material does. And I think that's very interesting.
Do you ever make speaking to the material kind of guiding the process? Do you make multiples or the same design a couple of times, or will you make one and then move on to something else?
Yeah, I make one and then do something else, except when somebody wants to order uh, a design in another color. Or I make slightly small differences, but most of the time I move on to something else.
It's a very, must be a very high, it's a lot of ideas to constantly evolve and keep coming up with
Yeah, but it's also challenging,
in a good
something
way.
in a good. Yeah, well, sometimes not in a good way. Then it's miserable because you can't get what you want, and then try it over again and over again and over. Yeah, every morning I think, well, I feel a zest for a new step or a new thing to do.
When did you start teaching?
I started with hat and bag making workshops, say 25 years ago, and later I gave workshops at various art academies. And for the last 10 years, I've worked as a guest teacher at the College of Fashion. It's called the MBO in Dutch. And for a year now, I have been teaching a real vocational hat making course of 1.5 years. And I do that at home. I think it's important that students learn all sorts of techniques, of course, but at the same time, it's very important that they learn as well to find their own style and handwriting. So I try to help them find their own individuality and their creativity.
The vocational training that you've been doing, could you tell us a little bit more about that?
yeah, there are four or five ladies. They come every Friday, a whole day, and we made a program, five parts, and every part exists of 10 lessons of a whole day. So we start with the easy techniques or the more basic, and then it's getting harder and more complicated. And the fifth part, they design their own collection, and that's very nice. And then they design five different hats with three different materials and three different techniques, and so on. And then they have they can choose their subjects out of five.
And is this the one that is the accreditation with the association? Is that part of this?
Yeah, there is the Dutch Hat Association. They come after every part, and then there's a kind of graduation. And they look at everything's all right, and they comment, they give their opinion about the hats and techniques and everything.
Because there aren't many opportunities for necessarily formal training. So I guess this is a different way of someone getting an accredited course and certificate and getting to learn from you as well.
True.
Yeah. And the students you teach at the fashion college, are they going on to be milliners, or is it just part of their course and getting to explore other accessories? What are they designing and making?
It's a part of their course. Yeah. Some students are very attracted to the hat making, but because it's not a very easy job to become your own, to have your own business. Mostly they find a job in the textile industry or that kind of branch.
You've worked in your own business for what is nearly 30 years. Would that be right?
Yeah,
How long have you
25.
been working? 25. You've been working for yourself for 25 years. That's an amazing feat to be working freelance and also finding teaching roles and building your own business up. Are these skills that came naturally, or have you had to work really hard to be conscious about having a business mindset to be able to sustain your work in this way?
Yeah. Well, there are two parts, the designing at one side and the teaching at the other side. And teaching it comes so naturally that it's not a problem at all for me. Yeah. Um, I really like to do that, and it doesn't cost energy. So I think it belongs to me. And then the other part, the designing, well, I really like to design and to make ads, but selling and business is very hard for me and almost impossible. I don't have it, and I think after 25 years, I don't think I will ever learn. So that's difficult, when you have your own business. But because I give lots of lessons, well, balances.
In your fabulous career, what have been some highlights for you?
Well, I think the highlights are participations in exhibitions in museums. For example, the Bayerisches Nationalmuseum in Munich, the museum in Basel, Switzerland, the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, the Textile Museum in Tilburg, and the Central Museum in Utrecht. And soon there will be an exhibition in China.
How did these exhibitions and collaborations with museums come about?
Yeah, they ask you. Yeah, yeah. the museum for example, in the Munich, they asked me to if they could use a picture of, of a hat on a model, and I said, yeah, of course. So I thought, well, they're going to use a little small display or something, but it appeared that they had huge billboards over the city and next to the museum. So I was very surprised. It was really great. Yeah. And what I also liked that well, I was making bags, and one of the first bags, it was shown at the bag exhibition, a large bag exhibition in the museum in Basel. So that was, yeah, I really liked. I was very proud of that. Yeah.
And how about a studio space? Where are you working from at the moment?
Well, at this moment, I don't have a studio because unfortunately, I had to leave in December. But I work at home and that's going well. Well, a downside is that you cannot distance yourself from your work and that I can't give head workshops at home. But well, everything has its pros and cons. And a few months ago, my partner and I, we bought a house in France, the Champagne region. And the idea is to give summer workshops over there. But we still have a lot to do of the renovations and we have to organize a lot, but everything should get started in 2025. So participants can even stay overnight and enjoy France. So that's my next project. And the vocational, I can have it at home because people don't have to make a hat in one day. At the workshops in the studio, they come in the morning and we have to steam everything and dry everything before 4 o'clock. And at the vocational course, 1.5 year, everything can dry on their own. And we don't have to stress because the next week they come back. So that's doable at home.
And how was it moving all of your things? Was there a lot of things to shift? And
Yeah,
how long were you in that space for? It's a lot to
years.
move.
Yeah, I was there for 15 years, and in every corner there were things, materials, and very heavy machines that were very difficult to transport. But
Yes.
well, we managed, and well, we have two garages over here, so a lot of boxes are there, and at the attic there are lots of materials, and I have a small working room here. So well, I'll manage.
You still got a creative space though.
Absolutely.
And how about your hat block collection? I'm always curious to find out about people's shapes that they work from. Do you have many blocks? How do you go about designing shapes?
Well, I have a basic collection, I think, and I often uh, use other materials to adjust them to my designs.
What do you do to them?
Well, I put, for example, felt on a block, and then I'll stiffen it so it's very, very, very hard. And then I'll take some clay or kneadable wood. I don't know how do you call it, kind of papier mache, and I'll make my own form. And then sometimes and sometimes I put plaster in that creation, so to make it more sturdy.
Wow. Do you keep them? Do you have a collection of these designs once you've created that form?
Yeah, when they're not broken, I keep them. Yeah, for some other times, perhaps.
And how about all your samples of all this exploration and material, yes, testing that you do? Do you keep all of this kind of development work, or is it gone?
Oh, I throw it away. Sometimes I keep from one um, um, research. I keep one or two, or I make photographs of them. But you can't keep those things forever. You don't know where to put it in the end.
And speaking of research and development, you have been doing some projects for the Hat magazine. How did that come about, and what kind of things have you been doing with Ellie?
Well, Ellie asked me to research for those special materials she bought at abroad, somewhere. And I liked it very much because you start with something and you look at it and you think, well, what could you do with it? So first I make a list. What could you do with it? Could you? And you cut it, burn it, bend it, tear it. Well, and when I have the whole list, I'm going to try it. And then by doing it, you come from the one thing to another. And I write everything down, and then I make a search kind of research report, and I make some samples, see what you can do. Yeah, so you can show it in the magazine. Yeah, so people can use it in their own way.
What's been the most surprising material that you've worked with so far?
Yeah, Ellie gave me a kind of bending plastic, very curious material. Yeah, yeah, you can do really a lot with it. Yeah, I think that's very handy to work.
Like that curious material. It is. It's wild with opportunities. And what's on the project list for you next? What's coming up that you're excited to be working on?
Well, now I find out how to make a frame bag. Yeah, I spend a lot of time developing frame bags with magnetic closures. Um, and now I find out how to do it exactly. I can make them in every way I would like to with matching hats. So I think I'm going to work on that.
When you say you've been developing, like we've been exploring this, how long and how many trials has this design or research been through?
Yeah, it's incredible. But I spent 1.5 year developing those frame bags because, well,
Wow.
it's not my profession, of course, and it's very difficult. Uh, Bag makers told me also it's not very easy to do it, and I really wanted to have it's with magnetic straps because you can buy the ready-made closures, but I really don't like them. So I had to find another solution, and it took me really a lot of time to find out how to do it. I can yeah, I can use it just as a technique, and I can start design at this moment what I would like to do. So, and of course, in France, we have a lot of work to do on the house, but I'm also looking out to those workshops.
I'm gonna have to come visit you in France. I'm gonna have to come in summertime.
Yeah, you do.
You've got a beautiful location, which is going to be so exciting to be sharing and to come to one of your workshops in France in the Champagne region. Oh, what a great time. Thank you so much, Irene. It's been wonderful to speak hats with you and so wonderful to have you on the podcast.
Well, thank you, Lauren.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Millinery.Info. This was made possible thank you to our wonderful Patreon podcast sponsors. These are Hat Academy, Millinery Australia, Hatters Millinery Supplies, House for Dawn, Judith M. Millinery Supply House, Hats by Lico, Be Unique Millinery, Lifted Millinery, Louise McDonald Milliner, The Hat Magazine, and Hatblocks Australia. Please head over to check out what these businesses have going on at the moment and show your support. If you're a business that would like to hear your name mentioned amongst that list, please head over to our Patreon page to sign up and become a podcast sponsor. The address is www.patreon.com/millinery.info. If a podcast sponsorship isn't for you, there are also 2 other tiers that you could sign up to as well. I'm your host, Lauren Ritchie, and it's been so wonderful to bring you this episode of Millinery.Info. I look forward to talking hats with you again soon.